there's nothing weirder than a foreigner who is more Japanese than a Japanese person. It's just, why are you doing this? But when you're getting to do things yourself, you're looking at your interests and how they help you understand Japan. You're being yourself, and you're already unique and crazy and wonderful enough as a person. That's all Japanese people want to know about you. They want to know why you do this and that. They don't want you to do the things that they do. They want you to be yourself, but learn how to talk in your way and do whatever. So I guess find your interests, be yourself.
こんにちは皆さん。ビジネスサクセスジャパンのポッドキャストへようこそ。Hello everyone and welcome to the Business Success Japan podcast. This is your host, Liddy Buchleman. This podcast is made for those who want to develop or strengthen the communication skills, cultural savvy, insights into current trends and conditions, and mindsets that are essential in a Japanese business environment. The helpful, practical suggestions and engaging insights offered here provide listeners with the in-depth cultural context needed to achieve their own version of success while collaborating with Japanese counterparts. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Colin Savage. Colin is a globally minded, locally focused leader with 8 years of experience in Japan, and he specializes in business development, communications and marketing, digital development, leadership, research, and strategy. His intercultural experiences aren't limited to just Japan, however, so be sure to keep listening to learn even more. But before that, let's go over a little bit of Japanese. In the previous episode, we looked at the phrase kao ga hiroi. Ka o ga hiroi. Kao ga hiroi. Kao typically means face, though here the translation is notoriety. Hiroi means vast or wide, and ga is the particle that marks the preceding word as the subject, which makes the literal translation of this phrase a wide face. In actuality, what it means is that someone is well known, has a diverse set of connections, or is otherwise well connected. In this episode, I want to introduce the wordことわざ. Koto wa za. Koto waza. A koto waza is a proverb or saying. One of the more well-known ones related to Japanese culture is perhaps, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. There are many koto waza in Japanese, but be sure to keep listening to hear which one has been most influential for Colin in his experiences in Japan and abroad. But before we get into the interview, I wanted to take a quick moment to highlight 3 ways you as a listener can help support the podcast if you want to keep it going. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're using, and consider leaving a review if you're on Apple Podcasts to help the podcast reach new listeners who could benefit from the information shared here. If you have a favorite episode, please go ahead and share it with a friend or colleague who you think would enjoy it. And if you would like to help make sure I stay well caffeinated enough to keep putting together these podcasts, you can also provide financial support at the podcast's new Ko-fi page. You can donate once or even monthly, and every little bit goes a long way. You can find the link to do so in the description of the episode. Thanks so much in advance, and let's get into today's conversation.
My name is Colin Savage. I am a born and raised Canadian guy. I don't normally use the word Canuck, so maybe I just did. I grew up in the middle of Canada, in a province that a lot of people can't pronounce, but everybody can draw, Saskatchewan. It's a beautiful rectangle, beautiful big skies. And I was here until my early 20s, and when I finished university the first time, and I headed off to Asia. So I then spent about 10 years in Asia proper, in a few different countries. Most of my time was spent in Japan, which I love. It's like my second home now. And then I spent another 10 years or so, and I'm going to date myself. I spent another 10 years or so really based in the UK, but working a lot across Europe, across Africa and the Middle East, and of course back with some connections in Japan. Most of that time, interestingly enough, with a huge Japanese insurance company. And then in 2015, with my lovely wife, Chiaki, who I met when I was living in Japan, and our 2 kids who were born in the UK, but raised there and in Canada and in Japan. We moved back to Canada to to do what a Nichan or an older brother should always do, which is take care of their parents. And so I'm happy to say they're doing lovely, and we've now been here for 6 years.
So how did you end up in Japan specifically coming out of college?
So I'm gonna be all open book here with you. It was literally the last plot of land before I had to give up on my Asia stuff and come back to Canada. When I originally went to Asia, part of it happened because I was in an English and French literature program, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. So I had somebody say, hey, why don't you just, do a short certificate or a diploma and teach English as a second language. And I thought, well, yeah, that's kind of cool. I always enjoyed meeting different people. I worked, unlike a lot of people in Canada, and I'm just generalizing here, but there's sort of this program where if you're in kind of some programs in university, you would go and work for like a government employer, or you'd work even in the private sector through the summer to gain work experience. But that really wasn't an option for somebody in the liberal arts. You had to be in administration or commerce or business. So I didn't really have a choice. So I tended to go to the Canadian Rockies, particularly Jasper and Banff National Parks. They're a worldwide draw. They pull people from all over the place. So I had a cool job. And I also just met people from everywhere. And I got to use the horrible schoolboy French that I learned and really figure out that what you learn in school isn't what you use in the street. And I also I started getting turned on to this whole idea of learning language. So I started learning German on my own. I started learning Spanish, and then there was Japanese. People were starting to come over in bigger groups. So anyway, revert back to school time. So back during term time, I'm in Regina. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And I take this kind of like weekend course for 6 months, and I start teaching English. And what happened was there were some immigrants. It wasn't a big draw at the time. The prairies are kind of brutal in the winter and equally in the summer, and not very big cities. So we didn't have a lot of like proper immigration. But what we did have were students who came to Canada who wanted to learn English, and they didn't just want to do it for fun, because those kids would go to Toronto, Vancouver, Los Angeles. They go to cool places. So we had some pretty serious students. And ironically, one of the biggest groups we had were Thai students. So I started teaching them. I got really close. We were kind of the same age. And then they said, well, like, what are you doing after school? So, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll continue. Maybe I won't. Side note, one of my advisors in school at one point told me, get out. Get out while you can. You can always study later, but you need to leave. So I took his advice and I went to Thailand. I knew nothing. This is going to paint a simple picture too. I knew nothing about Thailand. In fact, I don't think I've ever really spent a lot of time. I have a lot of books in the background that nobody can see, but almost none of them are travel guides. So whenever I've gone anywhere, I have never really been a travel guide kind of dude. So I went to Thailand, and I had these like 4 or 5 things in my head where I'd show up, there'd be no foreigners, I'd learn Thai in 6 months, it would be awesome. And I landed in Bangkok, and it was shirtless Australians, Burger Kings, 7-Elevens, and other things. And I was a little disappointed. I really enjoyed my time there. I met some wonderful Thai people. I learned some cool Thai phrases about work hard, play hard, which they really embody. But after a while, it was enough. And so I left, and I went to Myanmar for about 1.5 years, and then a couple other countries. Before, to answer your question, I ended up in Japan, which literally was the last piece of earth before I had to go back to Canada with my tail between my legs and say I didn't succeed in Asia. So my time in Japan actually was far longer than any other country. I was there for almost 8 years. It was life-changing, I think is the way to put it. I can't really imagine myself today not having a connection to Japan. And that's not simply because it's like my second home and my family and everything else, but it's really a part of who I am. So I know some people have perspectives on Japan where things are narrow, and you're kind of pigeonholed, like, hey, you're either a student or you're a teacher or you're not a student. So they kind of get a little, people get this view that it's like that. And that was entirely not my experience. It was literally, Colin, what do you want to do? And how do you want to go about doing it? And what can we do to help you get there? So I did everything. I think in our couple of our past conversations, I spoke a little bit more, but I'll keep it brief, from, teaching English and French, running a bar, running a couple of consulting businesses, working as a court interpreter, living in a temple for 6 months almost at one stint. And I had no limitation, despite the fact that I stand out like a sore thumb, being 6'3" and looking how I look. The nail that sticks up gets hammered was never aことわざthat mattered to me. So that's why I stayed as long as I did. I always planned to stay as long as I could in Japan until I started to get a little bit, it started to maybe not suit my purpose, or what was working for me wasn't working for them. And I always wanted to leave before I became one of some people I've met who just spend their time bad-mouthing a place that doesn't really deserve it. So that kind of opened my eyes up to, you need to find your place. You need to work to find your place, and you need to listen twice as much as you talk, and be open to being wrong and learning how to understand how other people do things, because I could read as much as I read, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to apply to everybody I bump into. Sorry, hopefully that was answering your question there. You'll see that I'll have very long and colorful answers.
That's great to hear, because especially among foreigners in Japan, as you said, people tend to feel pigeonholed, like you have to fit into these very clear categories. So it's great to hear about a different experience in Japan, somebody who's been able to explore and try different things in the country.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think, and I mean, I guess there's I'd make two kind of caveats to that. The first one is, I never lived in Tokyo. I never lived in Osaka. I never lived in Kobe, and I spent some time in Kyoto, but at the tail end of my term there. So their experience in those big cities is foreign to me. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to walk down the road and find a Tower Records and be able to buy my newspapers that are like the English paper. Like, that's the only thing I could get to me where I lived in Kanazawa on the West Coast was my copies of The Economist. And that was literally the only English magazine I could get delivered to me. So I don't know the challenges that they've had. I'd like to better understand what that's like. I think one of the things that maybe would have happened to me is I probably wouldn't have learned Japanese as well as I think I did, because people would be more interested in speaking to me in English, or I wouldn't be, kind of isolated with those around me saying, like, what are you trying to get at? And having someone help us out. It was really up to me. So I think that's part of it. And then the other pigeonhole thing is, if you're gonna live somewhere, I believe you need to make it your home. Like, I've lived in a lot of places and for crazy different durations of time. And I know from my own experience that in the 7 countries I've lived in and the 70 that I've done long-term projects in, the ones that I don't really know anything about and the ones that I don't have a really good recall are the places where I said to myself when I was landing or very early on, I'm only here for a month, or I'm only here for a couple weeks, or it doesn't really matter. And as soon as and it makes no difference in the duration. I spent a month in the Congo. It's one of the most colorful times I had ever spent. And it's not particularly long, and I didn't learn any, local language very well, and I don't have a whole lot of friends. But I had an idea that was like, hey, like, I might be here for a long time, so I better get adjusted. I better find my local cafe. I better make some friends. I better watch children's TV so I can learn some phrases, whatever tricks. And that is way more impactful than I spending 6 months or more in other countries where I really don't know. So that's kind of the two tips I would say is, get outside of the big centers and decide, is this somewhere you want to live and make your home, or is this just a temporary stopover?
Yeah. Is there anything more that you can tell us about that specifically? How do you go about making a place your home? Is it more of a mindset, as you mentioned, deciding when you go into it that this is a place that you're going to invest in? Are there specific actions? You mentioned a couple, but is there anything else?
So I've never really fit with the whole, I mean, and it's not just North America, there's lots of places, but the whole like speed, like how fast we need to live, like we need to get this stuff done. Yeah, I mean, we all have deadlines, and I try as much as everyone else to meet my deadlines, but I also give myself time to observe, and I give myself time to look around, and depending upon the place and what I see, like just like yourself, Lydia, I mean, we're multifaceted people. We have lots of hobbies and activities and interests and all those kind of things, and they're not always the piston or the spark plug is not always firing in every place you go to. So, for example, when I went to Japan, I noticed, and this is coming from someone, again, specifically who spent a lot of time studying French. I'm not going to pick on French people for being snooty about their language. That's just a stupid generalization. And I try to avoid generalizations as much as I can, but it does happen, right? I never had that happen to me once in Japan. I had people look at me with that sort of tilted head, like what? And they would ask me, why do you know that? Or why are you saying it in that way? Because I tried to find something, and I'd said it in how I thought it should be conveyed, and it wasn't really the right way. So we ended up having this little kind of blip in our conversation. But as to your question, like that was one of them. Like when I went to Japan, one of the things I thought was like, wow, like this country, the literature here is crazy. Like it's just, there's so much history. Like the first real diary ever written by, I can't remember her name, but you can probably help me out. Like thousands of years ago, and this crazy language that's not only has something borrowed from China, but something of their own and something just for foreign words. And so, I mean, being a literature person, I went hardcore into reading. I read every Tuttle Shokai English translated novel I could. And again, sorry for the viewers, but like 4 rows of bookshelves behind me that's all they are. And I read every single one of them. And when I finished them all, I kind of realized that, hey, that wasn't a bad way to go about it, because that taught me how people think. That taught me, cultural values. It taught me about challenges, societal pressures and ideas on romance and all that kind of stuff that when you're just learning Japanese or any language, you're not going to get to that depth. You just can't. So I read literature. I taught children. So I learned from the best teachers. Kids don't care how many times you screw up saying something. They look at you funny and then they just keep firing it at you. Adults will get nervous and they'll try to think of another way to say it. Kids would just they'll point at you and you're like, what the hell are you pointing at me for? Oh, well, yeah, your shorts are dirty, or like whatever stupid thing. And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? And then they'll point, and then they'll pull, and then they'll poke, and then they'll do. So I was learning Japanese from little kids 8 hours a day at one point. And, and then I'd watch Japanese children's programs. The problem is when my father or mother would call me, 4 or 5 months into it, they'd be like, hey, Colin, how's it going? How are you enjoying Japan? Hi, Mom. How are you today? I'm fine, thank you. And they're like, are you nuts? Like, have you lost, but it was kind of it was a different way to learn at a time really when there weren't a whole lot of YouTube videos or people popping up showing you this, and this is how a conveni works, and here's a Jido Hanbaiki, and all of those kind of things. I had to do it, right? So I think there's a lot of different tools and a lot of different techniques, but what I maybe am getting at, the crux of it is, like, what are your interests? And like, what are your interests and how do those translate into what you could learn about those interests in a crazy different, wonderful country like Japan? And then from there, and it's maybe the final point that I'll make on this is, like, be yourself, right? Like it's that jibun dashiku, right? Be yourself. There's nothing weirder than a foreigner who is more Japanese than a Japanese person. It's just, why are you doing this? Like I bumped into people who, that was their thing, right? Hey, Colin, do you know the 4, 5, I don't know how many kanji there are for rose? Like, well, no one cares. Or they would talk, foreigner to foreigner, they would talk to you in Japanese. I'm like, well, we know English or French or something else. What are we doing? But when you're getting to do things yourself, you're looking at your interests and how they help you understand Japan. You're being yourself, and you're already unique and crazy and wonderful enough as a person. That's all Japanese people want to know about you. They want to know why you do this and that. They don't want you to do the things that they do. They want you to be yourself, but learn how to talk in your way and do whatever. So I guess find your interests, be yourself. It'll work itself out in the end, or it won't. It's one of those things. Flip a coin.
Mm-hmm, definitely. There are only two options in that situation.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you can think of a third one, please let me know.
Mm-hmm. So the structure for today's conversation is going to be a little bit different in that it's a lot less structured. So just so everybody's aware, we kind of talked before and we decided on a few topics that might be interesting for the listeners. So we'll just be running through them and seeing how far we can get. Mm-hmm. So the first one that we came up with is actually one that's probably very practical and should be useful for people to hear a little bit about. And that is how and how not to use PowerPoints in Japan. It's actually something we haven't talked about before. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, it's a great topic. Yeah, I feel like I'm in the hot seat here, but I also feel like I'm capable of doing these rapid fire answers. Backtrack a tiny bit, so I spent almost 8 years at Meiji Yasuda Seimei, so Meiji Yasuda Life Insurance Company. And in Japan, that's one of the big four. So we're talking like 40, 50,000 employees, multi-billion dollar company, offices all over the world, but very traditionally Japanese. So as I remember listening to Kevin Crowell, his podcast with you, I thought was lovely. It was really well done. I'd love to meet Kevin someday. But I liked a lot of what he said about, the trying to figure out how you do things and how they do things and finding a common ground, or, literally just giving up and saying, you got your method, it works for you, show me how it works. I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way, but forget everything you have learned about PowerPoint from the Western world. Please. It does not work in Japan, particularly if you're doing it in English, but only slightly. We in the West, and I am guilty of this too, the PowerPoint are the visuals in the background, and you tell a story, right? Tell a story that resonates with the audience, make the audience the hero, tell them what you're going to walk them through, show them how great they are, give them a couple of cool takeaways at the end. Great presentation. Awesome. Have like 4 people ask you for the presentation afterwards. Almost no one. Forget that. It does not work in Japan. The PowerPoint is a document first and foremost. If you have ever seen, for anyone listening who has been and will be nodding along, and for those that have not yet been, they will learn fast. You will have put in front of you a 80-slide PowerPoint that will have hundreds of words. Some slides themselves with hundreds of words, or maybe less, crazy complex flowcharts and other things, almost like if you'd taken a manual and you threw up on a PowerPoint bunch of papers. The reason for this is very simple. It's PowerPoint, regardless of it being a digital medium, it's still going to get printed off. The world in Japan, and business in particular, is still very paper focused. And it is not a one-time delivery. So when you do a PowerPoint, you will be asked to create one. You will create one. It will go through numerous edits, additions, and other things. The entire audience may have already seen it before you deliver it. You will deliver it almost by reading slides out to people, and then they will probably have very few, if any, questions at the end, and you will be required to deliver that same PowerPoint in a printed version to everyone who's attended. That's just the way it works. So if you are thinking you can put some flashy bunch of images and a couple of cool things and some animation, it won't fly. It won't make it through the first 2 hurdles. If you're working in a Japanese organization, you won't even get that far. If you're coming from outside and pitching to a potential client, partner, or whatever, they'll nod, they'll thank you, and then you'll get a very nice note later on that says, could you write out all of your dialogue and add it to the slides and send it back to us? And the other thing it's actually quite important, or maybe in addition to this, is it's not just going to be the audience. That document is going to live for a long time. It's going to be circulated widely, and it's going to need to stand the test of time for a certain period. So unless you want to spend, hours and hours and hours repeating this thing to everyone who asks you for what happened, what did you say on slide 12? What was this on? Then you better get it all hammered out first and have it be completed. So literally what I'm trying to get at is a PowerPoint. It is just another Word document. It's just in a different format. That's all. It's a little disheartening. I know we have, I know I went to business school. Other people have. We've spent a lot of money to learn from people, to learn how to be storytellers and narrators and all that kind of thing. Doesn't fly in Japan. Not yet. I know there are a lot of younger Japanese who are taking MBAs overseas. They're learning how things are done. I know, and same with Kevin's comments about the rotating folks. I dealt with that for many, many years. Just because you study overseas doesn't mean you adopt that methodology and you force it on where you're working. It's the reverse. So yeah, that would be it, right? Forget what you learned. More is more, I guess is the way to put it in terms of writing, and allow time for people to read this before you deliver it, while you deliver it, and after you deliver it, because they're going to be reading it for quite a while, if it's a good one.
Thank you for breaking that down for us, because it's one of those more important unknown unknowns that people will inevitably encounter when they get to Japan, because in the States, the PowerPoint presentation itself it depends on the person, but a lot of times it's just a prop to use during your presentation, which is more of a performance. Whereas in Japan, the point is the PowerPoint to an extent. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, using what I just said, can you imagine what a Japanese audience that is being fed all of this would feel if you put up a picture of a girl crying while she's writing a note and said, how does this make you feel? They're like, I don't know. Tell me. You're the one that picked the picture. What do you want us to feel? Why are you showing us this? What is it leading to? They're not going to, it's not that they can't, it's that the purpose of this is the expert on the issue is telling you everything about it. It's not a you and I discussion on what this is going to feel like and how great we're going to be at the end. That's not it. They have their whole own other thing for those kind of meetings and delivery. But the PowerPoint, honestly, it's just a better looking format than a Word doc. Keep that in mind. I feel sad saying that now. I really like spending time making PowerPoints, but I can understand. I can get it. If you've ever sat in meetings where you're the only person that doesn't understand the language being presented to you, it's nice to see words at times. It's helpful. We'll find out when the new fangled technology comes out and we're all having it narrated, across the bottom of the screen and recorded, and we don't need to worry. But that's not the case now.
We're going to be kind of moving on to addressing common complaints or observations that a lot of foreigners experience when they go to Japan. And one of the big ones that I hear from a lot of people, I've been lucky enough to not experience myself, but there's kind of a common phenomenon where if you're a foreigner speaking Japanese in Japan, it almost just seems like people don't hear you. They they don't hear you speaking Japanese. There's just some sort of barrier there. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is?
I often defend Japan. That's just how I feel. My wife probably wouldn't agree with you. She'd probably say, oh my God, you're always complaining. Well, I mean, I do, because I see things at a certain depth and I wonder. But I often defend Japan. And one of the things I defend about Japan comes from my experience teaching English, particularly. A little bit French, but French was like university students and stuff. So I struggle with the English language method for studying, or the pedagogy in Japan. It's not just Japan. Actually, Canada is woefully bad at teaching French in school. It's rote learning. It is, you don't need to be able to say this. You just need to be able to read it and write it. We all know that that's complete garbage, because language is mostly spoken and heard rather than written and read. So, but what happens, and actually maybe the final point is, it's all about like translation in your head. Hear what you heard, translate it into what you're comfortable with, figure out the answer, translate that back, and hopefully it'll make it in time to catch up with the next sentence, which is impossible. So you got to feel what you heard and say how you feel. You can't spend time picking the right terms. The problem in Japan, in a lot of places, and it is improving, is that they teach language in a mechanical way. So they teach English particularly in a mechanical way. And if you're not comfortable in the fluid way that people talk, and the immediacy of, hey, you said something, you better respond, then it's really hard to get over some basic misconceptions. And the first misconception is, well, foreigners don't speak Japanese. They just don't. And that for most of the world is correct. But for the foreigners in Japan, it's mostly not correct. There's a lot of people I know that speak Japanese phenomenally well, better than I could ever speak it. And there's the two types, right? There's the learner that's very grammatical and very mechanical, and everything is proper, but the pronunciation, the enunciation doesn't flow. And then there's people like myself who are basically parrots, who learn. We hear what it sounds like, we repeat it back, and I don't really give a toss or something about the grammar. I don't care, because I know people don't live and die by grammar. They live and die by meaning and conveying emotion. So I've had it happen to me. I have it happen to me all the time. I haven't been back to Japan now for a little while for a variety of global reasons, but I have people look, and the one thing that I would say to people is, when you have somebody, a Japanese person that you're trying to talk to, and they're doing the I'm not hearing you, the weird thing is they're usually looking at your mouth. They're not looking in your eyes, they're looking at your mouth. And I used to get very annoyed with this and be like, I'm up here, up here, look in the eyes, but they're really trying. What is he saying? Like, is it coming out? Is it really coming out of that mouth? Like, is it really getting there? And so my advice would be, well, first is, yes, it happens. Two, it's not only happening to you, it happens to everybody. Three, the Japanese person or people you're talking to, they're really trying to understand. They're not making fun of you. They're not purposely, misinterpreting. They're really trying. And all you need to do is slow down and simplify. So if you've got this whole big sentence that you've practiced at home, watashi wa blah, 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 cut it down, right? Cut it down to like the place, the object, and the verb. That's it, right? Simplify it for them and repeat. And each time you repeat, don't do what typically happens, which is people raise their voice. Repeat and go slower each time, slower the next time until they get it. And most of the time, you'll be surprised, they will figure it out. There will be a coming together of the minds, and they will go, oh, right, this guy is looking for where to buy the train ticket, or he's wondering where the park is, because I basically went park doko, like koin doko, where's the park, right? It's not a proper sentence, but it's what people would say. If unfortunately you have someone who just isn't getting it, My advice is very simple. Thank them and find someone else. There's 130 some million Japanese people in the country. You will find someone who will try. And if you're really stuck, my advice is talk to a mom or a grandmother. They will almost always become the mom for you. They will give you lots of extra time. They will really intently try to listen. And more importantly, they'll do things that other people won't. They'll gesture, right? Like gesturing and doing that kind of almost quote unquote childish stuff. Moms don't care worldwide. They will do it, right? Are you sick and pointing to your mouth or, your stomach or, your head, whatever, like, gestures are pretty universal, but right. Stick to your guns, simplify what you're trying to say, slow down, don't increase your volume. If the person that you're talking to doesn't get it, thanks, turn to somebody else. And if you're really stuck, a mom or a grandma, and they will almost always help you out. In fact, I can give you a really short anecdote. One of the first months I was in Japan, living in a very small city on the West Coast, not Kanazawa yet, I had to go to a grocery store. I had nothing in my apartment. I had to go to a grocery store. I spent part of an evening figuring out, like, I want to buy simple stuff like, pasta, flour to make pancakes, whatever, right? I don't know what to make. So basic things. I spent so much time trying to figure out a phrase that was, I'm looking for syrup for the purpose of pancakes. Can you tell me where this is? And I used a verb that no one other than engineers would use. So no common person would figure it out. Did I end up getting syrup? No. Did I end up getting a lot of other things? Yes. And why? Because I went to the grocery store, I had my little cart, and I followed a mom and her daughter, not as a stalker, but I followed them around the store. And I'm like, well, what are they buying? Oh, look, they bought Kewpie. What's that? It looks like mayonnaise. Okay, I'll get that. I'll get some bread. I'll get this. I'll get this. I literally followed them around the shop. And when I got my 4 bags of groceries, that was like 40,000 yen, which is like a family's monthly shop for one guy. The girl and the mother turned around and looked at me, and she mumbled something that I didn't understand. And the mother came over and she's like, that's for you, pointing at me. And I said, yeah, it's my food. And she's like, wow, you're really big. And I'm showing gestures that our poor podcast people can't see, but you're really tall. You eat a lot. Oh, thanks. I don't know what she's talking about. But she had no problem with like looking in the bag and going, you know what this is for? I was like, well, what? She's pointing at the little really spicy mustard that they have. She's like, yeah, this goes really good. And she pointed outside at an oden stand. This goes really good with oden. I'm like, I don't know what the hell oden was. I was going to put it on hot dogs. Well, that would have been, clearing up my cold for sure. But I learned, oh, this goes with that. And when I walked outside and walked past the little oden stand, I saw, yeah, look, there it is, right? That's where it goes. So what I'm getting at is, right, you try, simplify your life, be willing to like learn other things. And look around for those that are going to help you, especially with the language bit. They'll be there. I have never been so encouraged to learn any language, and I'm a multilingual guy, but Japanese is right up there. And when you could just say thank you, and they would like, hey, come outside. Look, this guy can say thank you. And I was like, damn, I want to learn more. Like, I want to talk to these people more. Because other places, like, yeah, so what? He can say merci, or he can say, buenos dias or whatever. So what? There's tons of them that know that one word. In Japan, it was totally different. Hopefully, I answered the question. If any of the listeners have any further ones, please fire them on and we'll talk about it next time.
Yeah, so many great points there. Just one that jumped out to me was the staring at people's mouths instead of their eyes. I actually have that habit now too, because I lived in Japan and South Korea. And I think they've also done studies that show that bilingual infants, or infants that are being raised bilingual, tend to stare more at the mouth rather than the face. And yeah, so that actually might be helpful for people who might be having a little bit of a hard time understanding other people. Is looking at the mouth can actually be much more helpful. It gives you a lot more information to work with when you're trying to understand somebody else in a different
That's a fantastic point. And I would say I'd make two quick ones. One is people don't really point to their mouth in Japan, right? So you have to look, like you have to do it without the hand gestures. They'll point to their nose, but that doesn't mean something smells. That means me. Are you looking at me? And the other thing that I find really fascinating, and we can talk about another time, is I've read a number of articles now, and I've actually worked with a couple of professor friends in Japan. One of the craziest things that confuses me eternally, and again, this for another time, is despite the fact that they look at our mouth to try to figure out what we're saying, people in Japan, and I'm not singling them out because Korea might be the same, but what I've studied for Japan is they can't lip read. The lip reading is extremely difficult in Japanese. I've had to do it working in court, and I can't do it even as a foreigner. And I know when my wife and even my kids who have been raised in a few different countries, when we watch shows, or like a couple of weeks ago, we're watching a Japanese anime, the speaker cut out, and I'm trying to fix it while they're watching the movie, and I'm going like, guys, like, what's going on? They're like, well, we can't tell. Like, we can't read the lips. I'm like, well, we can do that in English so well. Right? We can do it and it translates. For some reason, maybe it's just me and the people I know, but I think there's an interesting thing there, some quirk.
Yeah, I'd be interested to learn more about that, because that's not something I've really thought about before either. I know that English, Korean, Japanese, they all kind of focus on different areas of the mouth versus others. So I wonder if that has something to do with it. Just the parts of the mouth that tend to be more engaged, or the throat.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it could be like tonal languages have a challenge too, because the tone comes from the vocal cords, not from the lips. So how do you do it? And Thai and Chinese and other things might have challenges, but we'll crack that another day. What's our next question?
All right. So the next observation revolves around inflexible bureaucracy in Japan, or what is perceived to be inflexible bureaucracy in Japan.
I should have mentioned earlier on, I didn't, but I currently work for an international commercial real estate company. Unfortunately, I don't have any connection with Japan. I'm trying to create one, because part of my role in my company is to professionalize certain things. One of those is to professionalize how business development works. Another one is to look at how strategy plays into the company. So increasingly, I am connected with the Asia Pac or the APAC folks, and that obviously includes Japan. But one of the things that I also do in my increasingly limited free time is I'm involved with a couple of startups, and I've always done that. And one of the things that is always a big issue for startups is bureaucracy, right? All of the officialdom. I got this great idea. It's going to make millions. Oh no, now I have to go and get a business license, and I have to pay for this, and I have to pay for that. Like I mentioned before, in 7 countries of residence and 70 of work, every country has bureaucracy. I really honestly don't think Japan is any more inflexible than anywhere else. I think what tends to happen is people get frustrated a little faster in Japan because everyone is so nice. It is very welcoming, particularly I worked in government for 6 years in Japan. I didn't find any kind of curmudgeons and other people that the DMV or whatever they want to call it. It wasn't like that. But what it was is we stick to rules, and we have rules, and they're there for a reason. And if you are how we've kind of been brought up, which is not just to challenge rules, but to go deeper and to look at, like, what's the logic behind this? This isn't efficient. It doesn't make any sense to me. You need to explain this. If you're going to take that path in a place like Japan, you're not going to get very far because and again, I'm generalizing, but the bureaucratic folks that I know and love, but that I know well, that's not part of their job description, right? They're working for the government because that is what they wanted to do. They wanted to serve the public. They're not there to learn the history and every reason why it takes 15 stamps to get a business license finished, or why you need to provide 4 years of past accounting for a company that's only just started. That isn't their purpose. So if you want to go and argue those points, go find yourself a government lawyer and go talk to them about it if you really want to learn. And there's a lot of places where there's a ton of literature where you can figure out the reasons for it or not. But even in our own countries, and maybe this is the fundamental point I'm getting at, is even in our own countries, there are things that I love this phrase, and I'll try to not butcher it. It's called absolute presupposition. So there was a guy in the UK many years ago called R.G. Collingwood, who was a professor of philosophy and history. And he dug into things to say, well, what is the point where you get to where someone just says, well, that's just because that's the way it is. So you imagine a child and an adult, and the child says, well, Dad, why is the sky blue? Well, it's blue because the light refracts off the blah, 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 blah. You give them a scientific reason. And then the kid goes, well, why? And imagine all of those whys. At some point, it gets to just because, shut up, we're done. And that's the absolute presupposition. It's the same thing with people who believe in God, people who believe in a whole variety of different things. When you get to that the crux of it, the absolute presupposition, that's the end, right? We can't go any further. So when we're talking about, like, oh, it's inflexible bureaucracy, oh my God, they use hanko still, and they do this kind of stuff. Yeah, but that's a legacy thing. That's historical. That's got cultural and traditional value. We do the same thing here, where there's no real difference between a hanko stamp and a signature. They're both just your seal. So when I hear people say it's inflexible, what I tend to hear them say is, well, I don't understand it, so it doesn't make sense. So they're not giving me what I want. Well, Lydia, if you and I went to the DMV in Michigan and argued why they have to do it, like, how far are we going to get? Right? Like, we're not going to get any better answers. So what I suggest constantly to people is, it's so much easier if you just learn the system. Just learn the system, go with the system, ask what's needed up front, the full package, and then just do it as you're told. I've helped a lot of people set up businesses in Japan, coach them through all of the licensing and everything else based on what I knew before. I'd probably be useless at it now, but I could help. It's just, it saves you so much time, right? So get all of the things you need. Make sure that right away you have a nice little piece of paper and a pen, and you ask, what are the things I need to get this? And methodically go through the list, and everybody will be happy. And maybe finally, there's always going to be stuff you don't get. That's okay. Like, I don't need to know everything about how a car works to be able to drive it to work, right? I know that that's how it's been built. Some are better than others. Okay, but there's a system there that works in a variety of different ways to suit my purpose. Use it as the tool that it is. I don't know what else I can probably relay other than, be prepared for things to take time. They take time. There's very little ways to expedite things in Japan, simply because that's not how the country works. They really abide by the rules. They believe the rules are there for a good reason, and they're not going to bend them for you or anybody else. So if you've lived in other countries in Asia or Africa or other places like me, and you know that, well, maybe sometimes a bit of money or a little bit of this helps, don't bring that attitude to Japan, please. It's not how it works. People are very proud of what they do, and they're very loyal to who they work for. So follow the rules. Everything will be done in time, and then you can move on to what's next. I guess is what I can say about inflexible bureaucracy. What do you think? Does that help? Is that a good answer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it, because at least in my experience in the States, and maybe I was just a particularly bad waiter, which is a very, very distinct possibility. But I know that people ask you questions, people ask why questions, they ask for clarification, they ask for information. And we're kind of trained to just make stuff up. Like we just because we have an answer doesn't mean it's the right answer. Whereas
Exactly.
I feel like you're in some ways, at least when you're dealing with bureaucracy, less likely to come across somebody who just makes stuff up, makes information up just to get the person to shut up. So
yeah, and I would say that's a really good point, because I would say bureaucracy is even one step further, because if they make stuff up, they get in trouble, right? Like if you're putting somebody on the spot about an immigration issue, and they make something up just to get you off their back, and someone else finds out, that's their job. That's them getting in real trouble. So, I mean, I've bent the rules in places where I can, but when it comes to things like bureaucracy, I learned very early on, you just follow what you're told, right? If I got to go to it doesn't happen anymore. I don't even think it's allowed. But when I first went to Japan, we were able to sponsor ourselves. So as long as you had a combination of real jobs with contracts and whatnot, you could cobble together enough money a month that would allow you to sponsor yourself so you could stay in the country. The loophole's probably been closed for a good reason. I remember the first time I went and did it, and I had to go to one building and go to the third floor and fill in a form. Take the form to the seventh floor to another place to get it stamped. Go to the building beside to buy a kite, basically a stamp, right, that showed that I paid the government. Take the stamp back to the first building, to the third floor, to get it put on the paper, take it back to the first floor to show everybody that I did it, and then it was done. And it was like, what the hell? Like, why wouldn't you just? But it's because I'm placing upon them my way of structuring things, what I'm used to, because I think it makes more sense to do it all in the same place or whatever. But there may be hundreds of reasons why it is what it is. So just follow the rules. Life will be so much easier. And you can enjoy Japan.
And my own experience that comes to mind is when I was a student in Japan, and of course had to go home eventually. So I had to close up my insurance, all of those things. And I guess I still had some time left on my government insurance. It's all run through the government if you're not aware of how it works. So the person said, oh, we need to refund the amount that's left for your insurance. Right. And I was like, oh, no, it's not a big deal. It's fine. It's probably not that much anyway. And she's like, no, I have to do this for you. So I just had to sit there for a half hour, watch the same lady run back and forth, do a little bow every time she saw me, and just like have to run from office to office to get a bunch of different signatures. And I was just beside myself, like, this is not worth $20. I just want to go home. But it was doing things correctly, making sure that things are done correctly for this.
And and I think that's an excellent example. And I would say maybe the last thing that I'll say on this, if we can move on to the next one, if we have enough time, is, like people, like I kind of mentioned before, people are loyal to where they work. They also have pride in how they do their job. And so if their job is to be efficient in the way that's been put out in front of them, and that means, I'm sorry, Lydia-san, I need to run back and forth 15 times because that means I've done my job and that's how I'm going to be graded. Well, go ahead. Like, who am I to tell you not to be successful in your job and what you need to do, right? You're here to serve me. This is how you're doing it. Fantastic. I had exactly the same problem with health insurance that I'll limit because of time, and also because, maybe there's a statute of limitations. But as to your point, right, the government insurance, the Kokumin Kenko Hoken, is provided by the government. You pay every month. The one thing that nobody really understands is that the first year, everyone pays the same amount of money, because everyone's on the same boat. Now, that means if I go to Japan as a corporate lawyer and you go there to teach English, our salaries will be dramatically different the first year and onwards. But at the first year, we're all the same, 1,500 yen, 1,000, 2,000, whatever it is a month. The second year, it gets adjusted. So it gets adjusted to match your first year of earnings when you put in your tax return. That's something I wish they told us because when I found out, and I was with the government for like 6 years, one of the reasons why I'm telling everyone this story about it's not inflexible bureaucracy, it's how things work. I wasted so much time arguing with the health insurance folks to say, you know what? I don't want to be part of this. And they would look at you and say, what do you mean, Colin? Say, I just want to leave. Say, well, you can't. Like, hold on, I can't leave a health insurance program that I decided to join. And the answer was no. The only way that you can leave this is if you leave the country or you die. And it was like, well, what if I just move somewhere else and I don't tell you? And they said, well, yeah, you could do that. I mean, there's nothing that stops you from doing it. But basically, you're in it until you leave or you're dead. And so it's another thing, right? That's the rule, right? Why wouldn't you want to be part of the healthcare system? Why wouldn't you want this coverage? We know it's a bit expensive. And my complaint was, why am I spending all this money for something I never use? And their response was, but Colin, you should be happy that one, you have a good enough salary to do that, and two, that you're healthy and you never need us yet. So it was very different perspectives that are both equally valid and help you get a full understanding of why something is being done the way it is.
Yeah, that was a great way of highlighting that. But we are starting to run out of time. Sure. So do you have a specific example that comes to mind of a communication breakdown that you think was due to culture specifically?
I really racked my brain for this. And I think there are one of two things. There's either so many that it's hard for me to figure one out, which is most likely the case, or they weren't necessarily like a cultural thing that created communication breakdown. It was really me figuring out different ways in my mind to get my point across. So I think it was more what I really learned in Japan, and it doesn't probably come across in a podcast. When I speak Japanese, I am much more specific than when I speak English. Like, I am really careful in the words that I choose, and I'm far more brief. And that's for a lot of the reasons I mentioned before, but it's also because that's kind of how I was taught, right? That's how I was taught. I loveことわざ. That's my big thing, right? And one of theことわざthat I like, and I'm cheating because I'm reading it off of paper because I couldn't remember, was kuchi wa wazawai no moto, which basically means the mouth is the source of disaster, right? That's where bad things happen. So saying and thinking something like that, it's listen more than you speak, right? Understand that you're in a different place and you should really be trying to learn more than you're trying to explain. God knows I've read all of those books behind me and so many more, but do I really know a lot about Japan? No. Like, I think I can navigate Japan fairly well and I can help other people more softly enter it. But one of the things that I also learned studying at Kanazawa University when I was doing a master's degree that I never finished, we won't talk about that, was my professor's office. He had a picture, and I don't remember the phrase, so I'll just say it in English, but it was, like a hand. Once you learn one part of the hand, you realize there's 5 things that you didn't know. And then you learn one, and so the more I learn, the dumber I get, is basically the crux of it. And that's kind of where I would say, like, the communication problems, a lot of it is, at least where we come from, I have to look smart, right? I have to show everybody what I've read and what I know. I have to have an opinion, right? I'm not listening to understand, I'm listening to respond. Well, we need to stop doing that, especially in a foreign culture where you have no basis for that. And I would argue with the smartest people in Japan, unless you grew up there and you spent your whole life there, even then you only know a little sliver. So know what you don't know, right? Take your time, listen more than you speak, and be very, it's back to the thing about being, people not understanding you, be brief, right? Get to the point, right? And be okay to, laugh at yourself and laugh at what you don't know, because you'll learn it in time. But that's kind of the process you should really take to this. Is it's a wonderful opportunity to learn a lot about a place you don't know and things you could never possibly fathom. So, I mean, that's kind of, all encapsulating big philosophical thing, and there's all the be determined and everything else. But yeah, I mean, that's communication problems are, generally speaking, people aren't listening to be heard, and they're just blabbing on and on. I'll say this quietly. people won't know. But my wife has something that whenever we're having a little bit of a disagreement, she always brings up, and I can never remember the phrase because I'm probably too angry at the time, but it's something along the lines of when two people are arguing, the one that talks the most is the one that's wrong, because they're trying to convince the other one of all the reasons why they should or shouldn't do something. The person that's right knows they're right. they know that they had the right thing to say. It's the other one that's trying to convince you something else. So again, back to the whole being brief thing, which I have not done particularly well during this podcast.
Oh, I love that. That's a great phrase to keep in your back pocket for the next time you have an argument.
Yeah, be sure, right? Because if you're talking a lot, you're digging your grave.
Doesn't look good. Yep.
You're digging your grave. So I mean, thank you. I know we're probably at our time, so thank you so much for this, Lydia. This was great. I look forward to the second one. I'd also like to share with you, and if you can, like, I have written a book on Japanese. I wrote it on a specific weird dialect, lovely Kanazawa Ben. If you're interested in anybody else, that would be great. Over to you.
All right, then we will link that up in the description of the episode as well. And is there anything that we didn't really get to touch on, or anything you wanted to quickly mention before we wrap things up for today?
No, I think one of the things that would be good to hear from listeners, because I think this is a really interesting way to do it, right? Like we managed to find, even with some really different topics, some kind of common threads. So I think for the listeners, like, if there's anybody out there that has further questions about very specific or general things, that would be good to hear. I know that you like hearing from the people that listen to the podcast and trying to tailor it to their views. There's a couple of other, I've mentioned Kevin's podcast a couple of times. I think there's some more like corporate things I'd love to discuss with you and your listeners. I navigated both public and private sector, I think, fairly successfully as the guy that I am in a whole variety of different things. And to Kevin's point too, I'm a generalist. That's how I really survived in those kind of areas. And I think generalists will rule the world, but that's just my opinion. So, I mean, yeah, like those kind of things. I think our topics were great. And I look forward to hearing about more of them and having to try to shed light on it, how to get over them, I guess.
Right, definitely. As specific as people try to be about bringing up aspects of culture, ultimately, there are larger and deeper threads that underlie a lot of them. So it's great to see how they come together in different ways.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I had a great time. Hope we can do this again.
Thank you very much, Lydia. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation, and please be sure to check out the links in the description of this episode to learn more about what Colin is up to, and be sure to let him know what you thought of today's conversation and offer any suggestions for topics you would like to hear us discuss in a future episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and share it with a friend, colleague, or connection on LinkedIn to help spread the perspectives and information shared in the podcast. And please remember to go ahead and subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're using, and also leave a rating and review if you enjoyed the podcast. If you would like to support the podcast financially, please check out my link to the new Ko-fi page to keep me well caffeinated and making content. As always, feel free to email me at businesssuccessjapan@gmail.com if you have any other questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes or interview topics. Also, be sure to reach out if you would like to contribute as a guest on the podcast to share your own cultural insights into doing business in Japan. I'd love to hear from you directly, so if you'd like to leave a voice message, you can find the link to do that in the description as well. But for now, remember that the more you learn, the more confident you will become as you explore all of the opportunities Japan has to offer you. Until next time, mata kondo.